Welcome to the MAM journals. Earlier this year I was lucky enough to build a relationship with Premier Bikes, who very kindly lent me a number of bikes, KTM, CF Moto and a few Triumphs which I hadn't ridden for a long time. I tried the Triumph Scrambler, which I loved, the 1200 version, the X. I don't think I could get on the XC, I probably need a box. I tried the Daytona 660, which wasn't my sort of bike, if I'm honest, but I understood it. I understood what it was about, and I can see why people would like that. And then I tried, which was a surprise to me, I tried the Rocket GT, which isn't normally the sort of bike that I ride, but I was quite taken by it and began to think, well, maybe one day, which is interesting. So anyway, they very kindly offered to lend me this bike, which is the Scrambler 400X, one of two bikes they make in the 400cc capacity. And I was looking forward to testing it. So what we're going to do today is I'm going to briefly go through the specifications, I'm going to go for a ride, and then come back and I'll give you the my opinions on what the bike's like and what its capabilities are. Hope that you enjoy the video. Okay, I said we'd have a quick go through the specifications. I think I should explain why it is going to be a quick one. Unlike some manufacturers, Triumph make videos which describe the features and benefits of the bikes, and they're actually really good. So there is access to good information on that. And then your next question might be, well, if they've already got a good one, why are you putting it in? Well, the reason why I like to put specifications and riding together is I'm conscious that some people are watching this video because they're thinking about buying this bike, and therefore I like to give them a one-stop shop where they can come, go through the specifications, see what it's like riding it, and have the debatable benefit of somebody's opinion. Anyway, let's start with the engine. Okay, so this is a 398.15 cc. Triumph do make me laugh. They're so specific about their specifications. Anyone think they're engineering led? It's a liquid cooled, it's 4 valves, double overhead cam, it's a single cylinder, and it's a 4-stroke. It produces 40 PS, which, if you think in old money or imperial measurement, 39.5 brake horsepower, or if you think in kilowatts, and I haven't met anyone yet who does, but I'm sure we will at some point, it's 29.4 kilowatts. It produces that power at 8,000 revs. Now, in terms of torque, it produces 37.5 Newton meters at 6.5. It's got Bosch fuel injection, it's a 6-speed gearbox, it's a chain-driven bike. You'll sort of notice the chains on us. Somebody said on my social media when I was posting photographs of me out and about, said, well, the chain's on the wrong side. It's quite an interesting thing, really, because this is what's called modern classics, I think is how Triumph categorise it. And of course, all the bikes originally had the chain and the gear change on the right hand side. Now somebody's decided that in order to keep that sort of heritage they will do that. I suspect engineers were quietly knocking their heads against the wall thinking, why am I putting the gearbox actually on the left hand side and you're putting the chain on the right? But I can understand and respect why they've done that. It's got this exhaust here. This is stainless steel, that's twin skinned under there apparently, stainless right through, cat in here, and going to these stainless twin mufflers. Again, aesthetic rather than engineering wise, I suspect, but I think it's quite a nice look. Going to the front of the bike, it's fitted, these are cast aluminium wheels. Well, they're aluminium alloy is what they are. I never know what they're alloy of, but that's how they describe them. Obviously it's a 10-spoke and it's a 19-inch wheel, 2.5-inch width, and it's fitted with 100/90 tyres. Looking at the forks, they're 43mm upside down forks, and they've got 150mm of travel. I think I read somewhere that these are made by an Indian company called Endurance, but I may be wrong on that, but that's certainly what I recall. In terms of brakes, as I sort of said about stuff being on a different side, they're on the other side. We normally will see them on this side. That's a 320mm disc in there, and it's fitted with a 4-piston radial caliper through on the side. The bike has obviously got ABS. In terms of rake, this is quite interesting really, because some of you who've watched the channel before, you'll know that I do think about rake and what the specifications tell me. Now this is a 23.2, back to Triumph's accuracy, degree rake. Well, that's quite an upright rake, really. Give you an idea of that style of bike. Something like the Honda Montesa, their trials bike, that's 23 degrees. And Triumph's motocrosser, their 450, is 27. So there's a sort of a bit of a clue in there. There's no adjustment on those front forks. Now, up here, whilst we're looking at the front, there's a couple of things I wanted to point out to you. One, this is not standard. This is an accessory, not particularly expensive. 2 accessories fitted on this bike, which takes it to retail price of just over £6,000. It's got that, and it's got this proper sump guard on here, which is quite nice, quite substantial. You can actually get a little extender on here as part of the kit, and that might stop some of that flow getting up into the radiators. But a couple of things I wanted to point out here. This grille, which is standard, is aesthetically, I think, quite nice and in keeping with the bike, but you can see, unless you take it off every time, it's a job to clean the front of the headlamp. Small issue, and it wouldn't bother me. I'd just unscrew it and do it every day if I owned it, but I left it dirty just to show you that's the consequence of it. Other things while we're up here, which I'd normally do with instruments, but it's because we've got a nice view of it. You can see it's got a USB in there. That's got I think they're called C connections in there, so you can plug things in and sat nav or something like that, if that's what you want to do on the bike. Right, so let's just sort of make our way along the bike. They described this as being chassis-wise, as being a hybrid spline perimeter tubular steel frame. You can see it's actually, the engine is what's called a stress member. It's part of the structure, bolted in there. Now, seat height up here, this is 835 millimeters. I'll talk about that when we go for a ride, so I won't mention anything more now. In terms of dimensions, wheelbase, i.e. contact tyre point to tyre point, is 1418 millimeters, and the bike weighs 179 kilos. This here is a 13-litre tank, and I'll talk about sort of consumption a bit when we do some instruments. So coming to the back of the bike, it's a cast aluminium swing arm down here. It's a twin-sided swing arm. Might be difficult to see, but that's what it is. It's got a monoshock with a up in here with a remote gas reservoir. No adjustment on that other than preload, i.e. the tension that you're putting in the spring to adjust the sag. Now, this is at the back. We'll actually wander around, show you the brakes. Right, this is a Bybree single piston floating caliper, and that's a 230 millimeter disc. You can actually see the monoshock better from this side than you can from the other. Now, the wheel on there is that's a 17 inch times 3.5, again cast aluminium alloy with a 140/80 tyre. Looking at the instrument, it's a single dash unit up there. It's well, I call it a combination dash really. It's analog speedo on this side, and then it's got an LCD display. They describe it as full feature. You can actually sort of cursor through it if you just turn here on this button here where it says I. I'm guessing that's information. You can see, looking at the dash, you've got odometer, trips. That was my last trip out. You've got 2 trips on there, which you can set at various times. That's fuel consumption, because you can get instant fuel consumption, i.e. as you're going along, or you can get average, and I got 76 out of this. That with 13 litres. Now 13 litres, I've done myself again. I do this for a career. That's 4.55 litres, 2.85 gallons. So if you're doing that, that would give you a range. Now, it does give you a range. It says I do 160 miles. Now, it's full. I can do more than that, so that must be reading until the reserve level. So I think you could probably get just over 200 out of a tank full. You have got traction control on this, which you can turn. You can see these lights on here, and I do something on the riding. I did actually turn it on and off a couple of times when I was out and about. But you can basically disable it through this function here. This T off-road settings are just about which units you want. So we're back to odometer. So fairly straightforward, and in the main, easy to read. There is a heated grips option on these. I couldn't find it on the website, which is but somebody on the video that I watched, which was Triumph describing the features and benefits, they do talk about heated grips, so clearly they do them. I don't know how much they are. Okay, so I've had a quick run through the specs. I hope you found that useful and interesting, but let's go into the bit that I like the most. Let's go for a ride. For those of you kind enough to watch my videos on a regular basis, you'll probably already have worked out that I tend to ride the bike on a number of occasions before I actually conclude the review. And I do that for a number of reasons. I like to get familiar with the bike, to get an idea of the control and its handling characteristics, and particularly at this time of year, I like to get a feeling for the tyres on the bike and what sort of grip and feel they offer. I'm not particularly impressed with some of the manufacturer fitted tyres, as they're called, original equipment or OE. In my opinion, many of them are not actually suitable for UK winter conditions, and they offer little feel or grip. And what grip and feel they do offer transitions from, okay, I've sort of got this, to no, I've completely given up, at a pace which can be alarming and is not my idea of a good day out. So it is important for me to understand what I'm actually riding on. Now, the 400X is fitted with Michelin Karoo Streets, which is a 70/30 tyre, and in my opinion, they're actually okay. They track a little on the ridged and rutted surfaces, but nothing alarming, and on the odd bit of dry road I found, I actually increased my rating from okay to fine. There are, of course, better wet weather road tyres out there. Michelin indeed make them. I think the Road 6 is one of the best wet weather tyres I've had the pleasure to ride on. Anyway, having established in my test riding or exactly what I was dealing with, I could then begin the enjoyable bit of planning the route. I got about 100 miles under my belt in the first couple of rides just to get the feel for it, and I was ready to plan the main route. But first, of course, had to stop for that essential cup of coffee and the photograph opportunity. I thought the bike looked stunning in the autumn sun. So, the next day, the weather app said dry and windy. It was neither. If it was a football school, it would be weather app 0, real world 2. Anyway, it didn't put me off my enjoyment. When I go through the rides and plan my main routes, I like to incorporate a number of different scenarios. So I go to town, dual carriageway, little lanes, and A roads are normally included within the review. This is Stratford, and as I'm going through the town here, you'll actually notice, and I'll just clarify for you straight away, it's got warning lights on the dash there. You can see the little orange lights, and that's for the ABS and the traction control. There wasn't a fault with the bike. I had been, this is a technical word, faffing about with the buttons and deliberately turned it off for some earlier work I've been doing, trying to sort of see if I could provoke any lack of grip or braking. And actually, in fairness to the bike, it performed perfectly well on or off. So, back to town work. The bike is very comfortable to ride. It's a nice upright riding position. It's got an easy clutch. The 835mm seat is quite tall for me, but I had some contact either side. It's actually, in a strange sort of way, it's a little bike, i.e. CC, but for bigger people, because I think some of the small roadsters versions, like, for example, Triumph's version is the Speed 400, that's got a 790 seat height, and I think for some people they are just too small. So this is a nice bike to consider if you're thinking, well, I need a bigger bike, but I don't actually need a lot of power.
The bike is light and balanced in traffic, it's very easy to ride, it's easy to filter, and it is precise. The gearbox is also precise. I did actually find neutral on a couple of occasions, but that was pilot error rather than anything wrong with the gearbox, and I do actually like the box. For me, that was a tick in the box. Less convinced about the gearing though, which is very low. I'm not actually sure what first is for. You can pull away in second or in third without any abuse of the clutch, and the bike will do 30 in sixth gear, and you can probably get down to sort of 20 in fifth without any labouring. So I'll come back to that a bit later. On A roads, I found the bike nicely poised. It's a bike, as I've just touched on with the gearing really, you have to go quickly up the box and you're very quickly in fifth and sixth, almost immediately as you're leaving a speed limit. Now, the instruments are clear, they are easy to read in the main. The only dial that I found, or indicator I found quite difficult to actually see any detail on, was the revs, but it wasn't any concern to me because, well, most of us ride by ear and by feel. We know what gear we're in and we know where the power is in relation to the throttle opening. But another thing that's very common on bikes like this is, or single cylinders, is that people say, oh, but they vibrate. And of course, they're right. Single cylinders do vibrate, and you can feel it through your hands. You can feel it through the pegs, and possibly through the seat as well. Now, it doesn't particularly bother me. I actually like single cylinder engines, and I think it's part of the charm and character of the bike. In terms of the impacts of that, sometimes you can get a lot of vibration from your mirrors from single cylinders. These were okay, and you can certainly see clearly enough behind you if you needed to take any action as appropriate. The bike has 40 PS, Förderstärken, and you won't. It's difficult for me to use words like quick or fast because, frankly, they wouldn't be accurate. It is nippy, I guess is the best way to describe it. But if you want to get to the power, you will have to be pretty heavy-handed with the throttle. It's up at 8,000 revs, and if you want to go and get it, you have to find it. Overall, on A roads, I enjoyed riding it, I found it engaging, and the handling, even on greasy roads, was predictable. Now, dual carriageways are not the natural hunting ground for a 400 single, and I think you've got to be realistic about your expectations about what it can do. Now, the national speed limit here in the UK on these sorts of roads is 70 miles an hour. And one of the questions I ask myself as I sort of get onto a dual carriageway is, right, if I get into a situation which I don't like the look of, will the brakes back me out of it, and have I got enough engine power to accelerate through it when I'm doing 70 miles an hour to clear it? The answer to both of those questions is yes. It's not a rocket, but it is capable of riding on dual carriageways in a way that is manageable and unalarming. Now, the bike will do 90 miles an hour according to Bike Magazine, which I think is probably right. Now, that's at the lower end of expectations for a bike of this cc and power, and apparently the Speed 400, which I haven't ridden, is a little bit quicker by having different gearing, although it has the same engine. In the spirit of objectivity, I really should ride the 400 speed, and if I get a chance, I will. So, as I go along dual carriageways, a question that I often ask myself is, could you sort of do long distances on it and maybe tour? Well, I'm a great believer you can tour on anything, but would I fancy this 2-up fully laden? Don't think it would be my choice, to be honest. Solo, well, maybe, if you prefer to go on the roads less travelled. I can't imagine that riding hours on dual carriageways on this bike would be, well, certainly for me, much fun. Now, Triumph obviously do accommodate that if you do want to go touring on it, and there's a full set of luggage available in terms of panniers, top boxes, they've got tank bags and tank rolls. So it is all there if you want to do it, and it looks quite nice equipment, and at prices certainly less than other manufacturers like to charge for branded accessories. Personally, for my sort of touring, I like more power, but I'd be the first to accept we are all different. So the other thing I think about when I'm riding on roads like this, because there isn't much else to think about, is, well, could you commute on it? And I think if you put a set of heated grips on it, maybe some sort of luggage, as most of us when we commute or go into an office, then we do need to take stuff with us. I think you could. I mean, it's good in town, it's nice on an A road, and it's safe on dual carriageways. So again, in my mind, that got a little tick. So if I think the bike could tour, it'd be a sensible commuter, if I'm honest, I think most people will buy this bike because they're looking to have fun. Now, I took one look at it and thought, I wonder what that bike would be like down the back lanes. So, of course, part of this review is I had to go and find one, and I picked one that I use regularly. Now, by the time I went along these lanes, I'd built enough confidence in the grip to not worry about all the potholes, the loose gravel and the mud, and just sort of settled into to see if I could enjoy it. The bike felt agile and secure. It was definitely fun to ride on these sorts of roads. Now, I chose to keep the sort of revs up. I like to feel the bike quite taut underneath me, so I was riding in fourth, but later on I tried it in fourth and fifth, just to see what it's like when you sort of eased off the tension in the chassis. It performed well in all those circumstances. Now, I've ridden a lot of bikes along this lane, and this bike certainly handles better than some of my bigger, heavier bikes, and definitely better than the sports bikes which I bring along here, which absolutely hate it. But I would think, being objective, it's not quite as pliant and forgiving as something like the Royal Enfield Himalayan, which has more suspension travel and absorbs more of the undulations. And that sort of brings me to my next sort of question. Is this a genuine off-roader or more of a styling exercise and a road bike? Well, I think it depends on your definition of off-road. Now, could the bike do gravel tracks and dirt roads? Well, 150 millimetres of travel should be more than enough to cope with that sort of expectations, and I think if you switch off the traction and the ABS, you'd probably have quite a fun with it. In fact, you would have a lot of fun with it. But if you fancy rock climbing or fast, rough ground riding, this is, in my opinion, probably not the bike. The specifications tell you that when you read it, and riding the bike certainly confirmed it. So in my view, those looking for what I would describe as proper off-road riding, other bikes are more suitable. As I made my way home, as I do after every ride of this type, I reflect, and there's actually a lot of things I like about this bike. I think, look, it looks good, it's got a good gearbox, it's got an easy clutch, it's got a nice engine for a 400 single. It feels nicely put together and quite tight in terms of how it's built, and it has I'm going to use the word, a quality feel about it. I think it's light and very easy to ride. It handles okay. It's fun on the lanes and fun on the A roads, and it is very comfortable. I enjoy my time on this Scrambler 400X, and I would like to take this opportunity to thank again, as always, Premier Bikes in Oxford for the loan.
Okay, so if I said the things I liked on the bike, was there anything I didn't like? Well, I'll be honest, there were. A couple of them are really easy to deal with. First one, I'd personally change the tyres to something more road going. If somebody had more aspirations for a little bit of gravel roads, they might change it to something more off-road going. And I'd put heated grips on it, because I think I like riding small bikes like this in the winter, and heated grips are always an asset. But I think the thing I most disliked about it was the gearing. Now, if it was mine, I'd sort of lose first gear and add seventh. And before I get comments from Arizona saying you can't do things like that, that's what we British call a joke. What I'd actually do is, obviously, I'd probably change the front sprocket and see how I got on and get that more rideable. Overall, I just felt it was a bit underpowered, or not necessarily underpowered, too slow for what I would want out of a bike, but that's a personal choice. Aesthetically, I think it's a real beauty. I love the silhouette of the bike. I think it's got some really nice finishes, and it's really nicely put together. Now, if you're spending, let's say, between £5,500 and £6,500, you've actually got quite a good choice in this smaller bike category, with various styling and sort of biases towards whether it's genuine off-road or just looking like it's off-road. But if I was looking to buy something like this, I'd try the KTM 390, Himalayan, Royal Enfield, bit more off-road bias, maybe even the Fantic Caballero, I think it's called. It's a 500. Technically speaking, that is slightly outside of those price ranges that they offer, because I think it's about 6,000 to 8. But trust me, you will definitely be able to buy one at less than £6,500 if you're inclined to do that. And of course, other bikes to consider are something like the Honda CRF 300, which is a very capable bike and capable of being ridden on the road and doing a bit more off-road. So I think it's really about deciding what type of bike you genuinely want. But put this on your test list, because this may fulfill your aspirations and ambitions, because we're all different about what we look for out of bikes. I do genuinely like this bike. There's a lot of good things about it, but I'll be honest, I didn't love it for the reasons that I've just mentioned. Now, I hope you found it useful, and I hope you've enjoyed this video. This is actually the last of the series that we're going to make for this year, although there is one more video when I'll be making a video which will be launched on Boxing Day, when I'll be doing an annual review. And if you're all familied out and just want to sit quietly for half an hour and watch some motorcycling stuff, I look forward to seeing you then. In the meanwhile, as always, ride safe, stay well.